In the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice celebrates the last day of hearings on the legal consequences of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. In Ecuador, more than 10,000 people have been detained as a result of the operations carried out in the framework of the internal armed conflict since January the 9th. And the government of President of Argentina, Javier Milei, has reduced the subsidies that ruled for family allowances for formal workers. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Caracas, Venezuela. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Bene. In the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice holds the last day of hearings on the legal consequences of the prolonged Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories at the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. The judges of the body continue to hear this Monday the arguments presented by the representatives of different countries. The public hearings began a week ago at The Hague, following the request of the UN General Assembly for an advisory opinion on the legal consequences of Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory. Throughout the days, the countries denounced the apartheid policies, the persecution of the Palestinian population, and the illegal settlement policy of Israel, along with other concerns. In this context, Turkey's Deputy Foreign Minister Ahmet Yildiz, in this declaration, told judges that his countries could not be blind-eyed in face of the situation.
We have always been on the side of the oppressed, regardless of their identity. That is why Turkey cannot be indifferent to Israel's attempts to change the character and status of the occupied Palestinian territories. And we cannot be indifferent to the continuous attacks of Israel against Palestinian people.
Likewise, the Turkish representative emphasized the deficiency of the international community to confront this policy, pointing out that the United Nations Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security.
The lack of political interest in the international community to address the root of the problem has caused a great injustice to the Palestinian people and to the international community as a whole. The United Nations Security Council has the primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and in this case has failed to fulfill those duties. Most United Nations countries have called for an unconditional and immediate ceasefire, as well as access to humanitarian aid. For now, unfortunately, the Security Council has failed to make these demands a reality.
In Palestine, the Prime Minister Mohammed Sayeh officially presented his resignation to President Mahmoud Abbas due to the escalation of violence in the occupied West Bank and the genocide in Gaza. The now former minister explained that the decision comes in the context of political, security, and economic developments related to the aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the unprecedented situation in the occupied West Bank. Sayeh stated that they are currently facing genocide, attempts of forced displacement, famine, and the intensification of colonialism. In this context, he stated that the next stage must take into account the emerging reality in the Gaza Strip, thus require new governmental and political arrangements guided by the urgent need for an inter-Palestinian consensus. In Palestine, Israel reportedly perpetrated 10 massacres against the families in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The attacks in different parts of Gaza left 90 people killed and at least 164 wounded, according to health authorities. Meanwhile, on the 143rd day of the ongoing occupation aggression against the Palestinian enclave, at least 15 citizens were martyred and dozens wounded, among them children and women women in an Israeli attack targeting a house in the Al Zaytun neighborhood. Since last October the 7th, Israel has killed 29,782 civilians and wounded more than 70,000 people, while thousands of bodies lie in the rubble of the devastated region. In Spain, Madrid citizens demonstrate in rejection of the genocide committed by Israel against civilians in the Gaza Strip. Citizens of Spanish capital meet at Puerta Atocha train station to reject the sale of weapons to the Israeli regime. The demonstrations denounce a double standard by the government and ask for specific measures to be taken in order to recognize Palestinian people's rights. The demonstration takes place after a report revealing that Spain was the European country to sell the largest amount of weapons to Israel in November. All of this in spite of the fact that the government had ensured that arms sales to Tel Aviv had ended after the beginning of the siege against Gaza. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Ecuador, more than 10,000 people have been detained as a result of the operations carried out in the framework of the internal armed conflict since January the 9th. According to data from security forces, 10,134 people have been apprehended in thousands of operations carried out nationwide. In addition, they detailed that have been seized thousands of weapons and explosives, as well as over 60 tons of drugs. By orders of the government of Daniel Noboa, the country continues in the midst of a state of exception and internal armed conflict under the argument of neutralizing 22 criminal groups cataloged as terrorists. However, citizens and civil organizations have denounced alleged violations of rights by the police and the military. In Argentina, the government of Javier Milei has reduced the subsidies that ruled for family allowances for formal workers. According to a decree published this Monday in the official gazette, the measure is urgent and affects benefits such as the family salary per child, prenatal allowance, adoption allowances, annual school aid, among others. According to local media, the cut in the allowances reaches about 50% of the total amount that was given to Argentine families in aid. This new measure by Milei does not do more than cutting income in general to the mothers who take care of their children and count on that income, leaving thousands of families out of the system. For analysts, this measure is the contrary to what is expected in a moment of crisis, such as the one we are experiencing in Argentina. In Guatemala on Sunday, dozens of people, mostly indigenous, with flowers, small wooden crosses, and photographs gathered in the historic center of the capital city in commemorations of the National Day for the Dignity of the Victims of the Armed Conflict, and also to demand the attention of the government. During the rally, they called that President Bernardo Arévalo should resume the preparation and the reparation policies established in the peace accords in order to continue the search for thousands of disappeared. According to the victims' families' organizations, the government of the former president Alejandro Giammattei dismantled the institutions in charge of compensating the victims of the armed conflict. This internal armed conflict took place between 1960 and 1996, leaving a balance of more than 250,000 victims, including the murdered and the disappeared.
We have missing relatives. We have grandparents, we have uncles and aunts. We don't know if they are still alive or no longer alive, if they are somewhere in the country or out of the country. We don't know.
On Sunday, an active duty airman of the United States Air Force was seriously injured after setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., declaring that he will no longer be complicit in genocide. In a video of the incident, the man identifies himself as Aaron Bunchel and says that he is about to engage in an extreme act of protest, claiming that what he is about to do is minimal compared to the suffering of the Palestinians. Then he places the recording device on the ground before pouring an unknown liquid over himself and lighting it while shooting "Free Palestine" repeatedly. The man remains in critical conditions. In Bolivia, the current rainy season, which began last November, caused the death of 39 people nationwide and affected more than 12,000 families. In statements, the Vice Minister of Civil Defense, Juan Carlos Calvimontes, said that practically the whole country has been affected by the floods and that the Department of La Paz is the most affected, where there have been street collapses, landslides, material dragging, and river floods that have affected local roads and houses built near the tributaries. In this sense, the Bolivian President, Luis Arce Catacora, informed that he had ordered the deployment of the military to help evacuate families and their belongings. In Cuba, the International Book Fair of Havana came to an end this Sunday. Thousands of citizens attended the HUT and the 17 subsidies during the 10 days of the literature event. This Sunday, the presentation of the group La Colmenita opened with music and children's voices on the fair's farewell road during its closing. For its part, Brazil was the guest of honor at the event and showed the best of its literature and contemporary authors. The Cuban Book Institute, organizer of the Great Literature Festival, made available to the public more than 3 million books, including paper and digital format, and also presented 1,000 new publications. Countries such as Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, Mexico, among others, were presented in this edition.
Here in this area, where they bring books of Brazilian literature. I found it very interesting because it's a way to share, and I have met many Brazilian writers that I did not know, and the way of writing is amazing. But in general, the variety of themes at the fair is very wide. Let's see. Really, if I start to name books, because the truth is that I have found a lot. But look at this one, The 3 Deaths of Kay. I have been looking at it for a while, and the truth is that I think the book is very promising, and I have found other novels. It is very spectacular. The fair seems to me to be a very innovative event, as always, every year, since the horizons are almost always broadened with each book, which is literature that is brought here, and also with the guest country, which is the country of Brazil, which also wants to innovate with new knowledge from their area, and not only Brazil, but also from other countries, the incorporation of some contributions from Europe, also from Asia, and also from the French Association, and it seems to me a very innovative event, also to acquire knowledge and to help us to our mental enrichment.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. The United States Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, have created and managed a network of secret bases in Ukraine for the past 8 years. Sergei Dostoevsky, a senior Ukrainian intelligence commander, told the New York Times that at least 12 secret sites for espionage purposes have been built along the Russian border since 2016 and were financed and equipped by the agency. The CIA is believed to have provided the Ukraine Ukrainians with intelligence to conduct targeted missile strikes, track Russian troop movements, and help maintain espionage networks, as well as helping Kiev train a new generation of Ukrainian spies operating in Russia and Europe. This Sunday, thousands of people rallied in major Austrian cities under this protest slogan, "Defend Democracy," to stand up against the extreme right-wing policies. The rallies were called by Fridays for Future Environmental Group, along with two other activist groups, Black Voices and the Platform for a Humane Asylum Policy. The organizers called for a reaction at the ballot box against the far right, avoiding at all costs the government pacts with openly extremist formations.
We are here in Vienna in front of the parliament, and we will soon start our chanting. We take a clear stand against right-wing extremism, which in fact seriously threatens our democracy in Austria. People are standing up against it today.
In Belgium, some 150 tractors today partially blocked the capital's central road, Rue de la Oie, and the European Quarter, where a meeting of European Union agriculture ministers is scheduled to take place. Under the slogan, "Europe Wake Up, Our Farms, Our Lunch, Protect the Farmers," the mobilized sector carried out road blockades around the Euro Room of the European Union Council residence, where the meeting of the European agriculture ministers is being held. These mobilizations were repressed by the police officers, who used water cannons to disperse the crowd. The farmers are protesting against the fall in their incomes, environmental regulations, administrative overload, or free trade agreements, such as the ones still to be concluded between the European Union and Mercosur. Also in Spain, farmers from all over the country gather with their tractors in front of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in Madrid. Under the slogan, "The countryside demands support, respect and recognition," the sector is demanding significant changes in policies and regulations that affect its daily activity. One of the main concerns of the farmers is the need for reforms in the agri-food chain law, which regulates commercial relations between producers, industry and distribution. In Senegal, presidential candidates called on the population to hold a mock election on February 25th, the date on which voters were to go to the polls before President Macky Sall postponed the elections. Opposition supporters in Senegal took part in the symbolic voting on Sunday to demonstrate their objection to the postponement of the presidential election, which was initially scheduled for February 25th. The symbolic vote in the capital, Dakar, was organized by a loose grouping of 16 presidential candidates, calling themselves the FC25, ostensibly to show their opposition to the postponement of the presidential elections and to demand a new election date without delay.
We wanted to make him understand that, despite the insecurity measures taken, despite his invitation to a dialogue that does not comply with the decision of the Constitutional Council, we wanted to give him a national and international opinion that February 25 is still election day for us.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Casara. Thank you for watching.